Welcome to Biography Central. You are listening to Life of Sri Ramakrishna, a complete biography. Chapter 14, Bhairavi Brahmani. One morning Sri Ramakrishna was plucking flowers in the garden of Dakshineswar when he saw a country boat coming towards the smaller bathing god of the temple. A woman with a small bundle in her hand stepped out of the boat. Middle-aged, beautiful, and with long disheveled hair, she appeared from her ochre-colored robes to be a sannyasini. All her belongings consisted of a few books and one or two pieces of cloth. Though nearly 40 years of age, she looked much younger. Sri Ramakrishna must have been drawn to her at the very first sight, for soon as he noticed her, he went to his own room. Calling Hriday, he gave him a description of the woman and asked him to bring her from the Chandni to his presence. Chandni is the roof court and the main entrance of temple compound. She's a stranger. Why should she come even if invited? Replied Hriday, rather surprised, for he had never before seen his uncle eager to speak to any strange woman. Go and tell her about me, and she will come. That was all he said. Without another word, Hriday went to the Chandni, where he found the nun, or Bhairavi, as she was called, seated. He gave her his uncle's message. The Bhairavi at once complied with his request, which again surprised Hriday. As soon as the Bhairavi met Sri Ramakrishna, she burst into tears of joy and surprise and said in a tender voice, "My son, you are here. Knowing that you were somewhere on the banks of the Ganges, I have been searching for you so long, and now I have found you." "How could you know about me, mother?" asked Sri Ramakrishna. She replied, "Through the grace of the Divine Mother, I had come to know that I was to meet three of you. Two, I've already met in East Bengal, and today I find you." She spoke with emotion, as though she had found her long-lost treasure at last. Sri Ramakrishna, too, was visibly moved. After a while, she spoke of herself. Born of a Brahmin family in the district of Jessore, Bengal, she had come to know through yoga power that there were three great personages in Bengal to all of whom she was to deliver a certain message. The two she had already met were named Chandra and Girija, both from the district of Barisal. Sri Ramakrishna sat close by her, and like a boy opening his heart to his mother, related to her every incident of his sadhana, his wonderful visions, his total loss of outward consciousness in the meditation of God, the burning sensation all over the body, his sleeplessness, and other symptoms. He further said that people looked upon him as insane, because his actions differed so widely from those of the common run of men. He asked repeatedly, "Can you tell me what these symptoms are? Am I really mad? And is this the result of my praying day and night to the Mother?" The sannyasini listened to his recital with feelings of joy and wonder. Full of motherly tenderness, she again and again consoled him. "Who calls you mad, my son? This is not insanity. Your state is what is called Mahabhava in the Shastras. It is because people don't understand this blessed state of yours that they call you mad. Sri Radha experienced this state, and so did Sri Gauranga. All these are recorded in the Bhakta texts. I have these books with me, and I shall show you that whoever has sincerely yearned for God has experienced this state, and everyone doing so must pass through it." These words reassured Sri Ramakrishna. Finding that the day had already advanced, Sri Ramakrishna gave her some prasad from the Kali temple, and knowing that, with her maternal attitude towards him, she would not take it unless he partook of it first, ate some. She went around the temples, took the prasad, and later came to the Panchavuti with doles of raw foodstuffs to cook and offer to her chosen deity, Raghuvir, a stone emblem of whom she always kept with her. The cooking over, she placed the food before Raghuvir and closed her eyes in meditation while offering it. Soon she had a divine vision and sunk in deep meditation. She became totally unconscious of the world. Tears of joy trickled down her cheeks. In the meantime, Sri Ramakrishna had felt a strong urge to come to the Panchavuti and appeared there in a semi-conscious mood. He advanced to the place where the Bhairavi sat absorbed in meditation. Like a sleeping man, he unconsciously began to take the food offered to Raghuvir. Soon after, she opened her eyes, and a thrill of rapture passed through her as she saw Sri Ramakrishna taking her offerings. For there was a curious similarity between her vision and the scene that was being enacted before her. Yet she could hardly believe her eyes. Sri Ramakrishna, when he recovered his normal state of mind, felt abashed for what he had done. He apologized, saying, "Really, I do not know why I do this kind of thing in a state of unconsciousness." She consoled him with the words, "You have done well, my son. It is not really you, but he who is within you that has done this, as he always does." In my meditation, I clearly realized who did it and why. I have come to understand that there is no further need for my formal worship, which has borne fruit at length. Then, without the slightest hesitation, she took the remnants of the food as sacred prasad, and later on, she consigned to the Ganges, the emblem she had so long devoutly worshipped, for she had found her beloved deity in the person of Sri Ramakrishna. "Mother, I shall learn if thou alone teachest me." This prayer of Sri Ramakrishna to the Mother of the Universe was fulfilled by his meeting with the sannyasi, or Brahmani, as he used to designate her, who came at the psychological moment when he needed confirmation from the scriptures for his various realizations, ridiculed as vagaries of a diseased brain. To Sri Ramakrishna, this was an additional proof that the Divine Mother was guiding him. The relation of mother and son, which sprang up between them from their very first meeting, deepened as they became better acquainted. The Brahmani took up her residence in the Dakshineswar temple. Both passed a great part of the day in the Panchavati, in religious conversation. The Brahmani had dived deep into the various Hindu scriptures, especially the Tantras and the Vaishnava literature. Besides, she had long practiced religious exercises, which gave a great practical value to her book knowledge. The master's questions as to his various experiences she would settle by quoting from authoritative texts, wherein are recorded similar experiences of previous seekers after truth. All this had a reassuring effect upon Sri Ramakrishna's mind. Scarcely a week had passed when it struck Sri Ramakrishna that people might misunderstand his close association with the Brahmani. One day, he threw out a hint to her to the effect. She agreed with him and decided to put up somewhere in the village when she could come and go every day. She fixed her abode on Devamundal's Ghat at Aryadaha, a couple of miles north of the Dakshineswar temple. There was no difficulty about her food and requirements, for she soon won over the village people by her amiable personality. She used to go to see Sri Ramakrishna daily. The Brahmani, who was a Vaishnava devotee of a high order, was soon overpowered with Vatsalya Bhava, motherly attitude, towards Sri Ramakrishna. She loved to feed him with various sweets and milk preparations, as Yasoda did her son, Sri Krishna. In her room, she would often wait with cream and butter in her hand and cry Gopala in an excess of feeling, while tears fell from her eyes. At that moment, Sri Ramakrishna would feel a strong urge to see her, and like a boy pining for his mother, he would run to her. Then he would sit by her and take the cream and butter. Or again, the Brahmani would put on a silk cloth and various ornaments, which she procured for this purpose, and in company of other women of the locality, lead a procession to Dakshineswar, singing songs descriptive of Yasoda's love for her boy, and with the sweets she brought she would feed Sri Ramakrishna. These touching scenes, with the holy associations they evoked, made a profound impression on the hearts of the spectators, and Krishna's mother would be recalled to their minds. Judging from what Sri Ramakrishna had told her, the Brahmani concluded that his extraordinary experiences were the result of his extreme love of God. Every day, she saw him go into trance as they talked on spiritual matters. From his loss of outward consciousness in meditation, his ecstasy during Sankirtans and various other traits of his character, she was convinced that he had scaled the ultimate heights of spiritual realization. She had read in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Chaitanya Bhagavata, and other books treating of Sri Gauranga's life, that the Lord would incarnate himself again to redeem the people from their misery and ignorance. This idea came to her mind when she found such a strange analogy between the life of Sri Chaitanya and that of Sri Ramakrishna. Both were mad after God, hath developed the same extraordinary symptoms, including the power of transmitting spiritual fervor to others by touching them while in a state of ecstasy. These and many other incidents common to these two lives indicated to the Brahmani that the Lord was incarnated again in the person of Sri Ramakrishna. Another incident happening at this time confirmed the belief of the Brahmani. We have already referred to the burning sensation from which Sri Ramakrishna suffered. This trouble reappeared during his second period of divine madness, that is, shortly after the Brahmani's advent, and continued with more or less intensity. All the efforts of physicians failed to alleviate it. The pain began with sunrise and increased as the day advanced. At noon it was so intolerable that Sri Ramakrishna had to plunge into the Ganges and cover his head with a napkin. 3 or 4 hours every day were spent this way. Fearing that too long immersion might lead to other troubles, he would come out of the water and lie on the marble floor, after cooling it by rubbing with a wet cloth. Though experts and laymen all ascribed this malady to some internal disorder, the Brahmani found another cause for it. She diagnosed it as the effect of his strong yearning for God. She added on the evidence of scriptures that this symptom had been manifested in Sri Radha and, in recent history, in Sri Gaurangadeva, when a tempest of divine emotion had blown over their minds. On scriptural authority, again, she prescribed a curious remedy for it. The patient had only to wear a garland of fragrant flowers and paint his body with sandal paste. Of course, everybody ridiculed the idea as being preposterous, but Mothra thought that there was no harm in trying it. Accordingly, it was done. Great was the astonishment when Sri Ramakrishna completely recovered under the treatment in 3 days. The incident was a further help to the Brahmani in identifying the soul that dwelt in Sri Ramakrishna's body. And when she heard of Sri Ramakrishna's vision of 2 boys coming out of his body on the way to Sihor, it made her assurance doubly sure. She concluded and told Sri Ramakrishna that this time Sri Chaitanya had appeared in the frame of his close friend Nityananda. A few days after, another symptom, of a different kind but no less troublesome, made its appearance. Sri Ramakrishna himself described it thus: "I was seized with a ravenous appetite which no amount of food could satisfy. No sooner had I taken something than I again fell hungry. Day and night one thought alone possessed my mind, and that was what to eat. What may this new disease be? I anxiously thought. When I consulted the Brahmani, she replied, 'My son, don't worry. Those who advance on the path of spirituality pass through such abnormal states. Wait, I shall cure it.' She asked Mothra to store in a room a large quantity of edibles of all sorts. When it was done, she told me to remain in that room day and night and eat whenever and whatever I liked. I did so, moving about and taking every now and then a bit of something or other according to fancy. After 3 days, I was cured. This sort of appetite has been recorded in the lives of other aspirants. Sri Ramakrishna experienced this abnormal craving for food several times in his life. These successful experiments, the strange coincidence of the various realizations of Sri Ramakrishna with the recorded evidence of the scriptures, and the wonderful experience she had on the very first day of her meeting, left no doubt whatsoever in the mind of the Brahmani as to the truth of her bold hypothesis about the Master's real personality. Now, she openly asserted that Sri Ramakrishna was not an ordinary devotee, nor even a superman with lofty spiritual realization, but that he was an incarnation of God born into this world for some inscrutable purpose. When she was convinced that her conclusions were correct, she began to speak of them freely not only to Sri Ramakrishna and Hriday, but to many others. One day, Sri Ramakrishna was seated with Hriday and Mothra in the Panchavuti when he casually remarked to the latter, "You see, a Brahmin lady has come here. She calls me an incarnation of God." "How can that be?" replied Mothra, "since the scriptures mention only 10 incarnations, and there is no room for an 11th one. But I admit you have obtained the grace of the Mother Kali. She says she finds the distinguishing marks of an incarnation on my body and in my mind," said the Master. "She is well versed in the scriptures, and she has also a lot of books with her." They were talking thus when they saw the Brahmani approaching with a plate of sweetmeats. Mothra asked the Master if she were the one of whom he had been speaking. Sri Ramakrishna nodded in reply. Mothra found her in a half-abstracted mood, as Yasoda used to be when feeding her darling. As she drew near, she saw Mother, and controlling her emotions with some effort, gave the plate to Hriday. Pointing to Mother, the master said to the Brahmani, "I was just telling him of what you say about me. But he says that the scriptures mention only 10 incarnations and no more." Mother bowed to her and awaited an answer. "Why?" she quickly replied. "The Bhagavata actually records 22 and then makes room for an infinite number of them. Besides, it is clearly mentioned in the Vaishnava scriptures that Sri Gauranga would be incarnated again, and there is a striking resemblance in many points between him and Sri Ramakrishna." She added that a Vaishnava scholar would settle the point, and that she was prepared to prove her case. Mother remained silent. The Brahmani's bold declaration made a profound impression in the Kali temple. The man who had hitherto been looked upon as a lunatic was emphatically declared to be an incarnation of God, and the scriptures supported this contention. The very man who had been ridiculed and slighted by everybody was being ranked with Sri Krishna, Ramachandra, or Buddha. He became the burning topic of the hour. Mother was puzzled. Torn between faith and doubt, he found himself in a dilemma. From his own experiences with Sri Ramakrishna during the past few years, he had to admit that he possessed many superhuman traits. But he was not ready to think of him as God himself. So the momentous declaration of the Brahmani raised a storm in his mind. Besides her disinterestedness, which was in her favor, the Brahmani was ready to verify her statement by scriptural authority. She had sent out a challenge. She was prepared to meet any scholar to prove her contention. Sri Ramakrishna, like a boy, was eager to have a meeting, partly to satisfy his own curiosity and to settle his own doubts, and partly to humor Sri Ramakrishna, as well as to convince him of his eccentricities. Mother consented to invite some of the scholars of the day to the garden of Dakshineswar to test the soundness of the Brahmani's contention. It was decided to invite Vaishnavcharan and Gauri, two famous scholars. A great devotee, Vaishnavcharan at that time was one of the leaders of his society, an adept in various philosophies and scriptures, especially in books on devotion. A real sadhaka, he was eagerly sought by the people of his sect for advice in their respective paths of sadhana. By inviting him, Mother had chosen the right man, and Gauri, too, was preeminently fitted for the task he was called upon to perform. In a few days, Vaishnavcharan arrived at Dakshineswar with other scholars and devotees, and a small meeting was held in which the Brahmani, Mother, and Sri Ramakrishna were present. Addressing the pundits, the Brahmani explained to them what she had heard about Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual practices and what she herself had observed, the conclusions of the scriptures on this point, and lastly, what she thought about the real nature of Sri Ramakrishna. Turning to Vaishnavcharan, she said, "This is my honest conviction about this God-man, based on the interpretation of certain facts according to the scriptures. I really believe him to be an incarnation of God. Now please state your reasons if you differ from me." Like a heroic mother, she held herself in readiness to answer all objections. And what about the man around whom this discussion pivoted? Sitting in the midst of that assembly, he looked like a boy, perfectly indifferent to the verdict, as if it did not concern him at all. We can picture him sitting at ease, immersed in his own blissful thoughts, sometimes smiling, sometimes taking a pinch of spices from a pouch, or again say to Vaishnavcharan, "Look here, sometimes I feel like this or that." The result of the meeting was that Vaishnavcharan subscribed heartily to all the conclusions of the Brahmani. Further, he asserted that the supreme devotion known as the Mahabhava seemed fully manifest in Sri Ramakrishna. It was really wonderful, he added, that while in certain extraordinary cases only a few of its divine characteristics had been noticeable, in Sri Ramakrishna, all of them seemed to be fully manifest. Mother and others were struck dumb at this bold assertion of Vaishnavcharan. Sri Ramakrishna, like a boy, said to Mother, "To think that he should say so. It pleases me to learn that after all it is not disease." That Vaishnavcharan did not say these things out of mere sentiment was proved by his attitude towards Sri Ramakrishna. With every day of their acquaintance, his regard and esteem for the master deepened. He became a frequent visitor to the Kali temple of Dakshineswar, where he sought the advice and guidance of the master in spiritual matters. He occasionally invited other devotees of his order to accompany him, so that they too might consult Sri Ramakrishna. Vaishnav Charan belonged to the Kartabhaja sect of the Vaishnavas. At a place a few miles north of Calcutta, he had a number of devotees of both sexes who practiced sadhana under his guidance. At his request, Sri Ramakrishna visited there a number of times. As days went on, Vaishnav Charan was so impressed with Sri Ramakrishna's pure character and wonderful spiritual life that he felt no scruple in proclaiming him to be an incarnation of God. A few days after this memorable meeting, Pandit Gauri Khanna Tarkabhushan of Indesh, district of Bankura, arrived at Dakshineswar. He was a great sadhaka of the Tantric school, and every year during the Durga Puja worshipped his own wife as a representation of the mother. He had a strange method of making sacrifice, homa. Instead of arranging the sacrificial homa sticks, twigs on the ground, as is the usual custom, he would pile them, a weight of some 80 pounds, on the palm of his outstretched left hand. Then he would set fire to them with his right hand and hold them in that position till the ceremony was over. Sri Ramakrishna himself saw him do it and used to say it was one of his extraordinary powers. On the arrival of Gauri Pandit at Dakshineswar, an amusing incident occurred, which Sri Ramakrishna would often narrate to his devotees. Gauri was widely known as a great scholar, and nobody could stand before him in debate. People ascribed this to his miraculous powers. Whenever challenged to a meeting of scholars, he would enter the hall thundering the refrain of a hymn to the Divine Mother, adding some martial syllables in order to inspire awe. It is said that this chanting served a twofold purpose, that of unnerving his opponents and awakening a strange power in him. Sri Ramakrishna would say that when he entered in this belligerent manner, it was impossible for anybody to defeat him in argument. Gauri entered the precincts of the Kali temple in the usual fashion. Sri Ramakrishna was seated in his own room and did not know anything about the Pandit's powers, but he was impelled by some power within him to utter the same words as Gauri was intoning, but in a louder voice. At this, the latter raised his voice to a higher pitch, to which the master replied by shouting louder. This competition between the two seemed so like the raid of a gang of dacoits that the guards ran from all sides with their clubs. But to their surprise, they found that it was nothing but a contest between the Pandit and their mad priest as to the respective strength of their lungs. Gauri, not being able to raise his pitch higher than Sri Ramakrishna, had to acknowledge defeat and entered the compound with a sullen countenance. Sri Ramakrishna afterwards said that the Divine Mother had transferred to him the great powers which had made Gauri invincible in debate, but which acted at the same time as a barrier to his realization of God. In the course of a few days, Gauri was charmed with the wonderful character of Sri Ramakrishna and surrendered himself wholly to him. A few days after the arrival of Gauri, Mathur convened another assembly of the Pandits, to which of course Vaishnav Charan was invited. The object of the meeting was, as before, to test the mental and spiritual state of Sri Ramakrishna by the touchstone of the scriptures. The meeting was to take place in the morning, and the place chosen was the big hall in front of the Kali temple. Seeing that Vaishnav Charan was late in coming, Sri Ramakrishna proceeded towards the appointed place with Gauri. Before taking his seat in the hall, Sri Ramakrishna entered the Kali temple and bowed before the goddess. He was coming out of the temple overwhelmed with emotion when Vaishnav Charan appeared and touched his feet. Sri Ramakrishna at once fell into a trance. A thrill of divine joy passed through Vaishnav Charan's heart, and thinking himself greatly blessed at the holy touch, he began to praise the Master by composing then and there a Sanskrit hymn. The radiant countenance of Sri Ramakrishna and the reverent pose of Vaishnav Charan as he uttered the melodious verses in his exuberance of joy filled everybody with bliss. After a while, the Master returned to his normal state, and all slowly moved on to the place of meeting. The proceedings commenced. Gauri said, addressing the assembled Pandits, "Vaishnav Charan is really fortunate. He has received divine favor today, so I shall not argue with him. Even if I did, I should certainly be defeated. Besides, I find that we both agree on the main issue and have both arrived at the same conclusion regarding Sri Ramakrishna. Any debate, therefore, is superfluous. Not that Gauri was afraid of his opponent's scholarship, but the fact was that he himself had come to feel, through his own spiritual insight, that Sri Ramakrishna was no ordinary saint. One day, the master, by way of testing him, said, "Vaishnav Charan tells everybody that God has incarnated himself in this body. How is it possible? What do you say? Is this all he says about you?" replied Gauri gravely. "Then he has said too little. I am firmly convinced that you are that mine of infinite spiritual power, only a small fraction of which appears in the world from time to time in the form of incarnations." "Ah," said Sri Ramakrishna with a smile, "you seem to outbid him in this matter. What do you find in me which leads you to entertain this idea?" "I feel it in my heart," replied Gauri, "and the scriptures are on my side. I am ready to prove my contention to anybody who challenges me in the matter." "Well, it is you who say so," Sri Ramakrishna said like a boy, "but believe me, I know nothing about it." Thus, the two great scholars who came to test Sri Ramakrishna ended by surrendering themselves at his feet. This was the first important episode in the life of Sri Ramakrishna since his meeting with the Brahmani. In the swift march of events that followed, it is impossible for us to fix our attention on the more important and deeper currents of thought which left a profound impress on the lives of both Sri Ramakrishna and the Brahmani. The relationship gradually became deep. Sri Ramakrishna accepted her as one of his gurus and, under her guidance, practiced a most difficult course of Tantric sadhanas. The spiritual outlook of the guru herself was considerably broadened, as we shall see, by contact with her wonderful disciple. The thing that comes uppermost to our minds in this connection is the strange fact of his accepting a woman as a guru, happening in the life of a man whose chief advice later to his devotees may be summed up in the phrase, renunciation of woman and wealth, and who seemed to consider the presence of a woman the greatest obstacle to a man in the path of sadhana. This incident is all the more significant and deserves careful consideration. In spite of his warning against association with women, the master accepted one as his spiritual guide and sat at her feet for instruction. He demonstrated thereby that there is nothing innate in a woman that obstructs a man's spiritual progress. Rather, it is the attitude of the man towards her that helps or hinders. If one loves a woman for her physical charms only, she degrades instead of ennobling. But if one looks to the divinity of her nature and sees the mother of the universe manifesting through her, she will help to cut the bonds of matter and show the way to bliss. Woman cannot be shunned, for in this world you cannot escape her. So long as there is the idea of sex, it will follow you everywhere. You can evade it only by regarding woman as mother or sister or daughter, that is, in the purest of relationships. But if you insult her, use her as a toy for pleasure, the nemesis of her wrath will follow you even to the outermost limits of the world. Sri Ramakrishna demonstrated in his life the proper attitude of man towards woman and vice versa, a precious boon to humanity for all time to come. Secondly, from the time of this contact, Sri Ramakrishna's sadhana took a new direction and flowed through new channels. Hitherto, he had tried to realize God without any external help or guidance. He had received no help from his first guru, Kinnaram Bhattacharya, except at the moment of initiation. By his own tremendous efforts, under the guidance of the ever-wakeful teacher concealed in the hearts of all, Sri Ramakrishna had achieved the apparently impossible feat of transcending all the limitations of finite existence and uncovering his true relationship with the one existence, knowledge, bliss, Satchitananda, in the compass of a few short years. By his zeal and devotion to God, his renunciation of worldly things, phenomenal perseverance, and unflagging determination, he removed the last barrier of nescience from his mind, and divine truth stood revealed before him in all its purity and splendor. We learn from his sadhana that in attempting to realize the divine, we do not aspire after something new or extraneous. What does not really belong to us can never be ours. By our struggle, we only discover what in reality belongs to us. And for this glorious culmination, the first thing that is needed is zeal. Without this element in the struggle, without tenacity of purpose, no amount of spirituality injected from without, no amount of scriptural knowledge, pilgrimage, association with devotees, prostration or genuflection will be of any avail. But the idea is too abstract, too high and sublime for the average person. Therefore, we see myriads of scriptures, an endless process of sadhana, which take the aspirant step by step to the supreme goal. The lives of saints, prophets, and incarnations of God serve only to awaken in our hearts a burning desire to get rid of ignorance. In the person of the Brahmani, Sri Ramakrishna found a living guru under whose guidance he proceeded, as we shall see later on, along the path marked out by the scriptures, to arrive ultimately at the same truth which he had realized before by his own unaided efforts. Thirdly, it is clear from Sri Ramakrishna's meeting with the Brahmani that all necessary help is brought to the sincere soul at the proper time, and if he only fervently prays to God, he is looked after. It teaches us the lesson that all that we require in religious life is to kindle a great zeal for divine realization, and the rest will be added unto us when necessary. Impatience only mars the peace and sweetness of life without helping us in any way. And the last, though not the least important point about this historic meeting, was the correct evaluation of Sri Ramakrishna's personality and his potential greatness. Up to then, everybody had measured the depth of this unique life by the foot rule, or yardstick, of his own shallow experience. Even Mathur was no exception. So while the realizations of the master were being weighed in the balance by incompetent judges, it was the Brahmani who turned the scale overwhelmingly in his favor by her declaration. The matter perhaps would have stopped there had she not challenged the world to disprove her if it could. What the result was we already know. Thus, the recognition of Sri Ramakrishna's greatness may be said to date from the time of the Brahmani's arrival at Dakshineswar. It was she who strung together and found a meaning for the hitherto isolated and neglected facts of his life, and pointed out their tremendous significance. She was the first to be convinced of his great mission, the role he was to play in the future adjustment of the world's spiritual ideas, and she knew her own part in it too. She set herself to work for the fulfillment of this divine purpose, and faithfully contributed her own quota of service towards the unfoldment of this wonderful life. And a word about the man who was suddenly transported by her from a region of ignominy to one of universal homage, from the opprobrium of supposed lunacy to the supreme honor of avatarhood, is a jump sufficiently long to turn the head of any mortal, however sane. But simple child of the Divine Mother as he was, this adoration and praise did not affect him in the least. He kept his gaze fastened on the lotus feet of the Mother, and yearned only for her guidance and inspiration. A crown was offered to him, and he set it aside, not like a Caesar as we see in the play, but actually and definitely, for praise or blame, acceptance or rejection, is nothing but a phantom of Maya to him whose mind always soars in the transcendental region of eternal truth. I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.